Hello, welcome to Hindi Reading Class 6D. Today we're going to be discussing the hard D sounds and some other retroflex consonants. As you can see, we don't have much left. So, today we're going to discuss hard D. Yes, the hard D sound. We said there was a soft D sound in Hindi, and that is called dental, and it's created by touching your tip of your tongue to your the bottom half of your top front teeth. But this is hard D. How is that formed? Well, with your tongue in this position, you can see that the tip of your tongue is touching behind the bump above your top teeth. Therefore, it is called retroflex. This is what you see the underneath of your tongue when you pronounce a hard D sound. Just like the hard T sound, it's the same exact position. So if you notice, this is the Hindi soft D, which is the same soft D that's in Hindi, and this is the hard D. You see the tongue position difference? The soft D in Hindi touches the teeth. It's the same D in Dhanyavad, touches the teeth, whereas the hard D sound, the tongue goes upward and touches behind the bump. And now this is the difference between the English D and the Hindi hard D sound. You notice for the English D, the tongue is more forward in the mouth and it's flatter, whereas for the Hindi hard D sound, it is curved upward and is behind the bump. Therefore, it sounds harder than English. English D is the, the. Hindi D to an English speaker sounds like da, 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 da. There's the hardness difference there. Okay, so we have once again, just as most other letters in the Devanagari alphabet, we have the D sound, the hard D sound, the retroflex D sound with no air. Da, 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 da. And then we also have the hard D sound with air. Da, 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 da. Without air, da. With air, da. Okay. So now that we've talked about all the hard letters, the retroflex letters, you'll notice that there's similarities between all of them. They all have a hanging line at the top coming down, so it's easier to remember this is where my tongue has to stick up. Okay, the hanging line. In addition, the ones that are aspirated both have circle shapes. The aspirated hard T sound, ta, and the aspirated hard D sound, dha. Both have circles. So let's say both. Now, here's where I would give you an opportunity to say both and correct you, whatever, whatever. But here, I'll just say them for you. Da, da, da. That's number one. And number two is dha, dha, dha. Now, let's practice hearing them. I'm going to say one, and you tell me which one it is. Dha. That was number two. Dha. That was number two. Da. That was number one. Da. That was number one. Dha. That was number two. Dha. That was number two. Da. That was number one. Da. That was number one. Da. That was number one. Dha. That was number two. Da. That was number one. Duh. That was number two. Duh. That was number one. Duh. That was number one. Duh. That was number one. Duh. That was number two. 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 Duh. That was number one. Duh. That was number one. Duh. That was number one. Now, why is it important to hear? Because if you can't hear it, you can't find it in the dictionary. Can't find a dictionary, you're gonna have problems. So it is important that you be able to hear it. Once again, this is just one of these are two of the four D sounds in Hindi. You have to be able to distinguish each of them so you can find them in the dictionary easily. Okay, now let's practice hearing the difference between the soft D sound in Hindi and the hard D sound in Hindi. So both of these are non-aspirated. So I will say one, you tell me which one it is. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number one. Okay, now the same goes for the aspirated ones. I'm going to say one, and you tell me which one it is. Duh, that's number two. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number one. Duh, that's number two. 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 Dha. That's number two. Dha. That's number two. Dha. That's number two. Dha. That's number one. Dha. That's number one. Dha. That's number two. Dha. That's number one. Dha. That's number two. Dha. That's number one. Dha. That's number two. Dha. That's number two. Dha. That's number two. Dha. That's number one. Dha. That's number one. Dha. That's number one. Dha. That's number one. Dha. That's number two. Okay. So, of course, aspiration has to change the meaning because it's Hindi. Aspiration is one of the most important things in Hindi. If you haven't figured out by now, it's very integral in the entire written and spoken structure of the language. So, what's the difference? Dole, swinging, dhol, drum, dola, swing or cradle, dhola, bridegroom, husband, door, rope or string, dhor, cattle, deed, look or sight, where deed is presumptuous, da is male, dhak, type of tree, dal, the cast down, dhal is a shield, dala, comfort cloud, dhala, flowed, dera, tent, dhera, wooden thread canister. Okay, hard and soft. Change the meaning of words. Now, this is probably more important than aspiration, to be honest. So, you have to get these right. So, the hard and soft change the meaning of words. This is one of the things you must get into your brain. So, dal is lentils, that thing they make you eat. Dal, thrown down. Deed is sight, whereas deed is presumptuous. Dar is door, dar is sphere. Doob, kind of grass, doob, sink down. Dus is 10, dus, to bite or sting. Dak is a grape, dak is male. Dant is tooth, dant is a rebuke, browbeating. Okay, once again, two paths before you. It's important because unfortunately, a lot of Hindi learners choose the easy path, what they think is easy path, and it turns out to be the path to destruction. It looks easy, but it is the path to destruction. The harder looking path, the one that seems harder, is the one that will get you success in the language. And so the problem is that hey, tongue position isn't a big deal. It's not important. I'm going to end up really messing up Hindi, and as a result, people will be indifferent, angry, annoyed, frustrated. They'll just tune you out. Or even worse, they'll completely misunderstand what you say. And that could be the worst case because you will have no idea. They'll just think you said what you meant, what you said. And you have no idea what you told them. That is bad. And so, of course, the easy way, which looks hard, is I'm going to keep practicing until I get it right because it makes a difference. Yes. And the end result will be that people will understand you, people will listen to you. After a while, people will stop saying, "Oh, hey, you learned Hindi." No, you'll become a speaker of Hindi, and there will be little misunderstanding. So now we're going to get to why is this here? Why is this in the hard sound? Well, this is an N sound, right? An N sound. This is pronounced like any N sound. No, right? No, right? No. So you should learn this sound. It happens quite frequently enough in Hindi. Not frequently, but frequently enough. No. Okay? Now, technically, this was always pronounced as na. This was a retroflex N sound, and to some extent, it still is a retroflex N sound. However, it can be pronounced without confusion, really, like no. It's not the right way to do it, supposedly, quote unquote, right way. But here is one of the times in Hindi you can get away with doing it the wrong way. You do not have to distinguish. But it helps you with your spelling if in your mind you do distinguish. So this is a retroflex N sound. Na. Just know that if you mess up, it's not the end of the world. This signifies that the word comes from Sanskrit as well because it's only found in Sanskrit words. As a matter of fact, all retroflex sounds are only found in words that came through Sanskrit or Prakrit. All right. So this is an SH sound. Shh, shh. Okay. Why is it in the hard retroflex lesson? Because this too was always pronounced as a retroflex way back in time. You see, this one makes a world of difference in the ear. However, to be honest, nowadays, most of the time, this can be pronounced just like a regular SH sound with no confusion. Technically, according to how much of a weird book sticklers are out there, the correct way is the retroflex way. However, you can get away with saying now it's good to remember for once again spelling, finding stuff in the dictionary. However, the reality is that many Hindi speakers do not distinguish, except in certain cases. We're not going to talk about those cases, but those cases will come along, and those cases are here. In a few lessons, you will be able to read these. And in these, you are forced to pronounce both and na in a retroflex way because you have to. It is actually the easiest way to do it. And you will find out why sooner or later. And I'll just as a preview, I'll tell you that the letter that comes after it is in a retroflex tongue position. You will always only find them combined with letters in a retroflex tongue position. Therefore, your tongue might as well be retroflex so you can pronounce what comes after the ta and the no whatever and the da. Okay, cool. All right, so homework as usual. Hold your hand in front of your mouth. Remember, we always do that. Hold your hand in front of your mouth and practicing the and ta until you can do it consistently with correct aspiration and proper tongue position. Then alternate between the two so that you have control over your aspiration. And once you do that, try to hear the difference between the two, and then try to see if you can hear it used in songs, in movies, on TV shows. It is very important to listen to Hindi. If you don't listen to Hindi, you will never speak Hindi correctly. Listening, it's the basis of learning any language. Reading is not. Reading is artificial. Listening is the basis of learning every language. You must listen to Hindi or your brain will never accept this language. Now, we're going to get into word practice as we have always done, and we're going to break it up into syllables as we have always done, I believe. And so, first syllable, da, da, da. Second syllable, la, la, da, 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 la. All right. First syllable, do. Remember, your hand should be in front of your mouth You should feel no air. Do. Second syllable. Ba. Do 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 ba. First syllable. Do. No air. Do. Second syllable. La. La. Do 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 la. First syllable. Da. In the second, we have ha. Remember, at the end of words, this is pronounced as a exhalation. So here we have da. Alternatively, we read da, but da, da. You should feel wind only on the ha. Da, 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 da. Okay, first syllable, do. To be short, do. Second syllable, la. Should be long. Do la, do la, do la, do la, do la, do la, do la. Bulla, vegetable. Ya, long again. So no air on the do. Do, la, ya. 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 Dolaya, 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 Dolaya. First syllable, ho. Remember here we should feel air. Do. Retroflex. Do. All right. Second is l. But because we get rid of the at the end, we combine it into one syllable and we have dhol. Dhol. You should always feel air on the D. Dhol. 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 Remember air. Dhol. 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 If you can't feel air, slow back down. Dhol. Dhol. Okay. First syllable. D. You should feel air on the Retroflex D sound. D. D. It has to be on the D. D. Second syllable. La. All at once. D. La. D. La. D. La. D. La. D. La. D. La. D la 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 D Now, of course, if you're not feeling the air, once again, you slow back down. D, la, D, la, D until you get that right, and then speed up. First syllable, da. You feel air on the D. Da. Retroflex, remember? Da. Tongue behind the bump. Da. Second syllable, ba. Da, 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 ba. Da. Remember, you should feel air only on da. You should feel no air on ba. Air on the B sound is bad. So da ba, da ba, da ba. Air, no air. Air, no air. Da ba, 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 da ba. Yay! First syllable, da. Second syllable, luck. So what do we have? Da, air, luck, no air. Especially on the K sound. At the very instant you say the K sound, the ka, you should feel no air. What happens moments after that is up to you. But at the very instant, you should feel no air, right? So even if there's a brief pause and then air, that's fine. But when you say ka, there must be no air, right? So you can say dhalak, dhalak, hear the pause, dhalak before the ending air. Dhalak, or you can just say no air at all. Dhalak, dhalak. It often has to do with how you feel or how out of breath you are. Dha, air, luck, no air. Dha, luck, dha, luck, dha, luck, dha, luck, dha, luck. Air, no air. Air, no air. Dha, luck, 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 dha, luck. All right. First syllable, de, de, air. Second syllable, ta, ta, air. Last syllable, ye. First, let's try the first two. De, ta, 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 de, ta. All right, let's try it all together. De, ta, ye, 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 Hitai, 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 Hitai. All right, cool. First, T, T. Remember, air. T. It has a circle, has a hanging line, retroflex, air. T. Second syllable, la, T, 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 la, T. All right. Last syllable. E, ढिलाई, 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 ढिलाई. First syllable, duh. Here, retroflex, duh. Second syllable, ha, duh, 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 ha. Daha, 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 dahana, 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 dahana. Dahana, 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 Dahana. Okay, and that was it. Thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned for next time. It gets even better.